Let's see. All right, guys, we're live. Probably take people a couple minutes to tune in and get in here. So today I've got Steve Maxwell with me. Let's go over some notes here. He was the first individual, correct me if I'm wrong, to instruct Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in the United States. Is that right?
No, I was the first to receive the blessing of the Gracie family. I actually was certified through the instructor training program in Torrance. I was the first one to get my certificate. Actually, my ex-wife, DC Maxwell, got her rape escape. That's what they called it back then. Now it's called Women Empowered. She was the first one to be certified to teach by the Gracies. Okay. I was the second person to actually get the teaching trainer certification.
Okay. What year was that? When did that all happen?
Oh man, when did that happen? That must have been about just after the UFC started, probably around 94, I'm guessing.
All right.
UFC was 93.
Oh, okay. Man, I didn't even realize it's been around for that long. So from my...
I started in 89 actually with the Gracie.
Okay. All right. Well, now it's all over the place. So you were one of the first guys, huh?
I had the first school in the Eastern Seaboard. There was pretty much there's no one around. It was just myself in Philadelphia. There might have been a couple guys, but they weren't running academies or schools or anything. And it was basically me in Torrance, California at that time. And then it just exploded after 1993 when they showcased jiu-jitsu in the first Ultimate Fight Championship.
So
and I was an investor in that organization. Jorge and Gracie came up with this idea of taking all these different martial arts styles, sticking them in a cage, pretty much no rules. The only rules were you wouldn't poke eyes, you wouldn't bite, and you wouldn't fish hook the mouth. But rapid punching on the back of the head, up kicks from any position, stomping people when they were down, bending fingers, pulling hair, groin shots, elbows with a point. All that stuff was fair game, man. And a really thin, wiry guy by the name of Royce Gracie pretty much shows what happens when you don't know how to fight in the ground in mono competition, one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty electrifying. And I was there ringside for the first 5. It was like, wow. And then when Jorge pulled his money out of the thing and sold it, I sold my share too. In fact, made a little money out of it, not much. Wish I would have stayed in there now.
Oh man, so this is the early beginnings of UFC, right?
That's correct.
And that's correct. So Dana White ended up picking it up after? How did that all work?
Well, they sold it, I think, to the Zupa brothers, and then the Zupa brothers sold it to somebody else, Okay. And well, see, the reason we got out of it was Senator McCain was really railing against human cockfighting. And in a way, it was sort of correct. I mean, it was pretty rough stuff, man. People getting teeth knocked out, broken bones. I mean, guys got really messed up in those first UFCs. And he wanted to get rid of it. Part of it was also he was in the pocket of the Boxing Commission. And, they were seeing the UFC as a threat to the revenue stream. Mm-hmm. So, it looked like legislation was going to be passed to get rid of it. And a lot of states did ban it. It was only after reorganization where they came up with rules and they got rid of the more dangerous elements of the UFC. They took a lot of stuff out. They did rounds. They put gloves in the hands of the fighters. Not that the gloves protect the guy getting hit, but it protects the hand of the guy doing the punching.
So it was bare knuckle in the beginning?
It was bare knuckle, man.
Jesus Christ.
You weren't allowed to rap, nothing, man. Wow. And, the reason Jorge picked Royce over Rickson was like an amazing athlete. But Royce, he didn't look like an athlete. He was tall and thin and wiry and a really good-looking guy, real baby-faced, and just a really nice guy. And he just didn't look like a fighter. And for him to prevail against these giants, it was like, whoa. I mean, it was so amazing, and people thought it was fixed or fake. but I can assure you, those were real fights, man. It was.
So he was using jujitsu, and the other guys were using just whatever,
Whatever they did,
just
whatever they did.
going after him.
Yep, karate, kung fu, capoeira, tang sudo, taekwondo. You know, he even fought other grappling styles, judo, wrestling. You know, and yeah, it was pretty amazing. That it just showed the just how good jujitsu can be in one-on-one situations. Of course, you know, it always comes down to the practitioner more than the style, but the jujitsu style allows a smaller, weaker individual to prevail against much bigger, stronger guys. I don't know any other martial art that would allow you to do that. You know, especially, you know, if you're going toe to toe with, you know, somebody like a Mike Tyson. Oh my God, you have no chance. But you would have a chance if you could clinch him and bring the fight to the ground. You would have a chance. You might not beat him, but you could certainly survive. And that's the whole key of, you know, what Horian was trying to showcase with his family's version of jiu-jitsu, which they learned from the Japanese, which came from judo. And there was a long history there. It's pretty fascinating, actually, the history. I would recommend anyone on this podcast is really interested, go to the Valenci brothers and look at their podcast. Pedro Valenci goes into detail on the history and the origins of jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and Elio Gracie's role in creating what is known as Brazilian jiu-jitsu today. But, you know, no matter how you spell it, you know, jiu-jitsu is Japanese, so the origins came from Japan. It was the art of the samurai, unarmed combat of the samurai.
The Valenci brothers, they practice in Florida, don't they?
Yes, they do. They have
Yeah,
fantastic
my father's friend has been training with them for a decade in East Florida, like Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah,
area. Is that right?
Yeah. There
So,
was a awesome video just recently of Tom Brady's wife. What's her name? Is it Michelle Bunchen? Giselle Bunchen, right? She did a demo with with Guillermo Valenci. Just fantastic. Just goes to show you, you know, even what a smaller. Well, I mean, she's very athletic and you know, very fit, but beautiful demonstration, you know, of basic self-defense.
Do you think that's why jiu-jitsu has gotten so popular now? It's from the UFC, and it's real world application, its utility in real world application. Would you?
Well, people learn pretty quickly that jiu-jitsu is a very effective self-defense martial art, and the UFC basically also saved wrestling, college wrestling, because wrestlers are tough as hell. You know, when I first started jiu-jitsu, I started training in 1964 as a kid, and I always wanted to make my wrestling better. It was the only sport I was good at. I was too small for football, too short for basketball. Plus, I lived in the country. There was no place to play basketball. It was all grass and cow fields. And you know, I started like every other kid, you know, with the old York barbell systems. You know, there's old things. My dad took me down to York, Pennsylvania. And in those days, every kid was taught Olympic lifting along with the regular bodybuilding kind of stuff. It was when I was a physical education major at Westchester State College, and I was a PE major. I learned of the Nautilus training system through reading the old Ironman magazines and a couple articles in the old York Strength and Health by Arthur Jones. And I became very fascinated with this idea of the thinking man's barbell. And I found a place at the Drexel Line Shopping Center. It was the first Nautilus gym in Pennsylvania. This is 1972. It was run by two bodybuilders, Greg Ellis and John Carton. Ellis is now a PhD in biochemistry and nutrition, but at the time he was working on his master's degree in exercise physiology. And I was just blown away. And I trained for, you know, the next 2 years while in college using that old Nautilus system, those old dinosaur, with the clamp with the Nautilus camps, and I was in tremendous physical shape. My record, I wrestled Division I NCAA. My record was 18-2-1. That's a damn good record, in Division I school. I took second in the MACs. I'd always burn out at the end of the season, and I wish I knew then what I know now about overtraining. I just too often, too much, push myself, going to the wall every day with the wrestling room, And even in those days, they used to encourage you to train 3 days a week. So you can imagine. Thank God I was.
So they would encourage you to train in the weight room 3 days a week alongside wrestling?
Yes.
And
I quickly found, man, I mean, even though I was in my teens, and at the height, wow, it really burns the hell out of you, And part of that was the Dan Gable mentality. Dan Gable was like one of the most awesome wrestlers that ever lived. But he had this tendency just to drive himself to insane levels. I mean, to give an example how like crazy this guy was, when he won the NCAA, after he got the medal on the podium, he put on his plastic sweats and went out for a run.
Yeah, that's
after what
we call that the Rocky Balboa syndrome.
Yes. And kids growing up, we believe that's the way you should do it. Because here's the problem in all martial arts, any sport. The people that are the champions, like the Dan Gables of the world or the Hickson Gracies, they are genetic phenoms. They have phenomenal, they're recovery geniuses. Their recovery ability is just far beyond what the normal person is. Yet we all try to base our routines on what they're doing. And it's a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. They get away with it. They're not good because of what they're doing, in spite of what they're doing. Now, poor Dan has had double hip replacement surgery and can barely walk. And he's about a year or two older than myself. I'll be 70 this year. And, almost every guy that I went to, I did college wrestling with, is completely crippled, obese, can barely move, hip replacement surgery, knee replacement. And, that's the fate that awaits people that fail to heed the warnings that we're giving here on this show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because I coach a lot of people who are doing jiu-jitsu now, and they often ask me, they obviously want to implement some sort of exercise or resistance training to enhance their ability to do the martial art. And they're often confused on how to balance that. They are under the impression that they need to practice this martial art as much as they can physically tolerate. And I tell them right off the bat, that's insane. Because just like there is a certain amount of physical overtraining, there's also a certain amount of neurological overtraining. There's only so much better you can get per practice session, we'll say. So we've got people who go twice a day. Now,
I know.
And when they ask me how much should I do, especially with any sort of skill practice, I say, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just my intuition. Stop the practice when you start to suck. When you start to notice your skills start to wane a little bit, that's when you should probably cut practice. And it's going to happen a lot quicker than an hour and a half. So we've got people now training twice a day, an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, thinking that if they do it that way, they're going to get better faster. What do you think about that? What advice could you give for people who believe that?
Well, when I had my gym exercise, like I said, it was the only game in town. Almost everyone on the East Coast at some point came through my school. I had over 250 people coming in, and not all at once. And I had a chance to almost use the students like a laboratory. I was able to see what worked and what didn't work. And we tried every combination of workouts, conditioning, and practices. It seemed that the diminishing return was just about 4 times a week. And it seemed that the best training for strength training to complement this was once a week.
Okay.
When we tried to do 2, we started feeling terribly overtrained. Now, I started jiu-jitsu when I was 38, so I was a little bit older, a little bit wiser. I already had a lot of wear and tear from stupid stuff. But it seemed like once a week seemed to be ideal. Now, for guys who could only make practice a couple times a week, let's say once or twice a week, yes, they could strength train a little bit more often or do some other form of conditioning. The problem there's nothing wrong with going in and drilling and doing light drill and practicing the movements, but the problem is it never stays light. And a lot of these guys are like blue belts, purple belts. They have to listen to the black belt instructor. So even if they don't want to train hard, a lot of times they get pressured into training hard. Mm-hmm. And the teachers push them harder than they want, harder than they should. And what I noticed that the guys that trained the most, they ended up being hurt. Now, there are those phenoms that seemingly can just go and go and go and go. And, it does seem like these guys that really do a lot of this excessive training end up being champions. But once again, it's in spite of, not because of. They would have been much better off doing a little bit less. It would certainly extend their career. Mm-hmm. I'm currently a 6th-degree black belt in the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu system. I got my black belt in 1999. It says on Wikipedia 2000, but it was actually November of 99. I was Helsing Gracie's first black belt. So I've been a black belt for a long time, man. And I'm telling you, wear and tear is a real thing. Mm-hmm. All these young guys think that they're going to last forever, but instead they're just beating their joints up, and they're going to end up with a lot of pain, stiff joints, osteoarthritis, and maybe just outright joint replacement surgeries. But there is a way that you can continue. I still get on the mat and roll with safe partners. You can still continue even to advanced age if you stop the overtraining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got some clients who they're under the impression, again, they need to do this a certain amount of times per week, regardless of if they start to get overuse injuries. And a lot of the questions I get is, how do I continue to do this and mitigate the wear and tear? So what I normally tell them is, when you do something like this, some sort of martial art, especially an intense one like jiu-jitsu, you're accepting the risk of injury. You're accepting the risk of the wear and tear. You are trading your health for the skill if you want to optimize the skill. That's kind of what I'm telling them. But you're saying there is a way you can still optimize the skill and drastically reduce the amount of wear and tear. Now, do you think implementing resistance training, of course, resistance training is going to make you better at the skill. You're going to be able to produce more muscular force, and it's just going to make you a better athlete. But what about resistance training for the sake of minimizing or reducing the wear and tear risk of injury?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know that a stronger joint is going to be more injury resistance. Mm-hmm. Increased strength and endurance, increased cardiorespiratory functioning, body composition, and making yourself more resistant to injury. The problem with a lot of martial arts, particularly grappling, is that it is a form of resistance training. It is. So you're constantly resistance training. Your muscles are working under load, maybe not to momentary failure, but So you hit a good point there, Jay. We go into martial arts with open eyes. We know it's dangerous. You basically, you go in there with the expectation that there's a strong possibility you're going to get hurt, and you accept that. But with your strength training should be 100% safe. If you're getting hurt and injured with your strength training, you're just doing it wrong, man. Strength training should prevent injuries, not cause injuries. Now, of course, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. But, you know, I'm a big NFL fan, and that is a brutal sport, man. I mean, a collision sport like that. And how many times have you seen on the field, like a guy run out for a pass to catch it, or not even a contact injury, and all of a sudden he pulls up lame, or like you twist his knee a certain way or something, and you wonder what the hell happened. It didn't really look all that bad, but he's really hurt. What a lot of people don't realize is that injury had been brewing for weeks and even months with stupid training. The guy had been doing box jumps and plyometrics and really fast, explosive exercises, and slowly but steadily eroding joint health, weakening the connective tissue, and the straw that breaks the camel's back out there in the field. And what he actually was doing wasn't really instrumental in the injury. It had been, a couple months brewing in the weight room. He created that injury. That's why it's really important to look at what you're doing with your strength training. And listen, I was guilty of some very stupid training. Right in the, I'm trying to think exactly when it happened. I guess late 90s. I was very much into high intensity training and super slow machines. I was actually certified by Ken Hutchins in the super slow method because a lot of my clients were elderly people, and that was just a great way to train them. And I got good results from it. In fact, I trained Hoist Gracie using super slow for those first couple UFCs, and his endurance and strength. Yes, his ex-wife, his wife at the time, was one of my trainers at Maxwell, and I introduced him. They fell in love. She moved out to California. I lost one of my best instructors, but he was training in a very sane, rational manner with the strength training. But I started hearing all sorts of, there was a lot of pushback against super slow, and there was a lot of people bashing it. And at that time, there was so much criticism. And I myself had become a little disillusioned with the whole thing. There was a lot of infighting in the super slow exercise guild. And I started looking at traditional ways that the mighty men of old used to train. And it seemed logical at the time. How do those Hindu wrestlers train with the big club swinging? And, what are the Russian wrestlers doing? And, what are all these people doing around the world? What are some of the traditional pre-steroid ways that people trained in the early 1900s, right through the 40s? What were they doing? And I kind of fell prey to that stuff, the sandbags. I'm embarrassed to mention I was the one that introduced the turkey's get up to the kettlebell community. In retrospect, these were all huge mistakes, and I'm suffering for it now. And one of the promises of the kettlebell training was that you can selectively recruit fast twitch muscle fiber and make yourself more explosive. No, you can't. And there's no research to support it. And it's complete nonsense. All you do is just beat up your body and create a lot of shearing force in the joints. And I gave myself a really good case of osteoarthritis in my right shoulder doing kettlebell snatches and turkey's get-ups. It's just not a good exercise. No one muscle is under any kind of significant time under load. And the skills of doing it are very high. To do a heavy weight and do a get-up requires a lot of skill. And the skills are completely non-transferable to anything else. It's a skill unto itself. It's like a stupid pet trick. It looks cool. It definitely takes skill. You definitely takes, a combination of mobility and agility and strength, but it doesn't transfer to anything else. It's a thing unto itself. It's much better ways to work the body, as you well know.
So this is what people believe. People believe that if you perform an exercise that sort of resembles a particular movement or skill that you do in a sport, that it's going to make you better at performing that skill in the sport. And a really good friend of mine, he won't, like we were talking about before we started this, he won't let go of the Turkish get-up because all the MMA fighters are doing the Turkish get-up, thinking that, I don't know, what were your thoughts when you introduced the Turkish get-up? what did you think? What kind of effect did you think that was going to have in the sport, and how were you wrong?
We were convinced that somehow it would miraculously protect your shoulders. It was actually touted by some physical therapists as a therapy for shoulder problems. There was guys that claimed they fixed their shoulders from it. This complete poppycock. I think they're either lying. They were lying or deluded.
Right. The only reason it would have is if so. This is what I explain to people, and I'm sure you agree with me. The only thing that transfers from exercise to your sport is the strength. So if you see an improvement in a particular skill in your sport, it's not because of you performed a particular silly, funky exercise. It's because you somehow developed a certain amount of strength in that exercise, and that's what's transferred.
Correct. The strength transfers to skills you're not. Like Olympic lifting. Man, those Olympic lifters are amazing athletes. I learned Olympic lifting as a kid. I used to go down to the New York Barbell Club. That was the then mecca of Olympic lifting. Actually, in the world, U.S. was still very much a contender in world and Olympic competition. I used to watch Bob Benarski, the last world champion from the U.S., and I learned proper Olympic lifting. But I quickly realized that, man, that has nothing to do with wrestling. And I felt damn near injured almost every time I would do the Olympic lifts. And I quickly abandoned it, even though the promise was that you would, become more explosive and have, work your fast twitch muscle fibers. But when it comes to the get up, in my mind, it just seemed like something similar to jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And I should have known better. I did know better. But, it was kind of like an old traditional wrestling conditioning exercise that had been used. And, in the old days, they just didn't differentiate. And yeah, you get, for sure, it's hard, and you certainly work a whole bunch of muscles doing it, but it's really ineffective when compared to just working each muscle group by itself. The idea that it transfers to anything, nope, it doesn't. And there's a good chance of being hurt. And there's so many better exercises out there, safer exercises. But, the young guys, it's hard to convince them because, when you're young and you're full of, testosterone, you can get away with a lot of stuff. I sure did. And, in retrospect, my kettlebell and club bell experiment it was a bad experiment.
So,
and I'm sorry I did
it. So you were largely responsible for the popularity of kettlebell training?
Yeah, I was the guy that taught Joe Rogan kettlebell.
And now you think it's not nearly as effective or a relatively useless form of training, right?
Well, I wouldn't say useless. Any form of training, if it's progressive and done hard, is going to give you pretty decent results. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt I was a strong dude, man. Mm-hmm. But I could have got strong in any number of ways. I could have been doing chin-ups and dips and, squats and got just as strong. Way safer. I wasn't thinking wear and tear. That's something that no one thinks about when you're 20, 30, 40, Anybody can be amazing at 20, 30, 40, and even 50. Anyone can get to 50 and be in damn good shape. But boy, I'll tell you, things start to change once you get 60 and 70 and 80. And I made up my mind, I want to be something at 80, 90, I want to be like one of those guys. A lot of people don't talk about Clarence Bass anymore in the HIIT community, but that guy was a real pioneer. There was a guy that pretty much went to one weekly strength training, and this was decades ago with great success. Dr. Richard Wynett is another pioneer in high-intensity training. He had the Master Trainer newsletter, and he based it on what research was available at the time. And that's another guy that got he must be darn near 80 himself now, in great shape using the high-intensity training method. But I'm not saying that these other methods don't work. Of course they work, but they work at the expense of your overall joint health as you get older. And no one is looking at long-term wear and tear. No one.
So the thing is, a lot of people see the prolific athletes, Joe Rogan, and you taught Joe Rogan kettlebell training. That's correct.
I did.
So they, Joe Rogan's on top of the world now. He does kettlebell training, and a lot of people will adopt these protocols because people who appear to have achieved some level of success using them are advocating them.
That's correct. And it's the siren's call. It's it's the siren's call, because just like Drew always says, just because someone gets a particular result training a particular way doesn't mean they couldn't have got the same result or better in less time and much safer doing something else.
Mm-hmm. So for somebody who pretty much introduced kettlebell training, the problems with it were wear and tear, too much momentum, which results in wear and tear, right? Excessive force production.
A lot of shearing force in the spine. My back is really stiff now, despite doing yoga and stretching. And it's those damn swings and snatches.
So let's talk about, because a lot of people are really hooked onto kettlebell training.
Oh, it's fun. It's almost like a cult. And it is fun.
Well, so is high intensity.
Good.
Training. It's kind of so is high intensity training is turning into a cult too, almost. It's so for someone who introduced kettlebell training, what are the problems with it that you can tell other people who are engaging in kettlebell training, people who believe kettlebell training is the end all be all, from the person who pretty much introduced it? What are the problems with it? Well,
first of all, there's not one benefit that you can get from the kettlebell swing, which is kind of like the basis of movement, that you can't get doing hinged out deadlifts or even 45-degree back extensions or glute ham raises. Not one benefit. You're not recruiting fast twitch muscle fiber, and because the weight is relatively light, you're not really even going to develop that much strength. There's so much momentum involved that you're only working a small portion of the muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, you can do kettlebell exercises slow with high tension. Kettlebell presses are fine. Kettlebell rows, are fine. But the problem with kettlebells, they're awkward. And, some people make that like it's some kind of advantage. Odd object lifting I used to get into. It's silly. You don't want to, because it takes a lot of skill to handle an odd object. It takes a lot of skill.
People call that.
I'm going to give an example. When I was a kid, one of my first jobs, I was 15. I worked for Red Ball Moving and Storage Company. And we used to have this little skinny guy. I mean, this guy was like a twig, and he was a chronic chain smoker. And we went to a house to deliver a grand piano. And he said, check this out, boys, because we were wrestlers and on the junior high school football team. And this little skinny guy took that grand piano on his back with a strap like a Inca porter, mm-hmm. and carried that thing off the ramp and up the stairs into the house. Because he knew exactly how to use his body. He had been moving furniture forever. And in truth, he was using only just a very small portion of his muscles. His legs weren't bending more than just a little bit because these steps were shallow. Mm-hmm. And he knew exactly how to move heavy stuff. It was a skill. But when it came to outright strength, me and my body were way stronger than him. But we couldn't demonstrate the strength like he could. So there's a mass confusion between demonstrating strength with skillular type activities, strength activities, and actually building general strength. The general strength transfers to everything. The specific skillular strength has low transfer. The strength still transfer. It's like gymnastics. Some of those guys doing rings and all that. Oh my God, they have magnificent physiques. They look good, but the skill doesn't transfer. And there's way better ways to build general strength than risking your joints doing iron crosses and front planches and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, that kind of leads to the Olympic lift conversation. A lot of people say using machines or Nautilus machine or a body weight or time static contraction. I know you're a huge proponent of time static contraction training, and they'll say it's bad for strength. And the reasoning is, you use a Nautilus machine, you do a push-up or time static contraction, your ability to bench press or squat or deadlift does not improve nearly as much as if you were to do those specific lifts. So a lot of people say you need to bench for upper body strength. You need to squat for lower body strength because they're using the bench press and the squat as a measure of strength, when in reality, it's simply a demonstration of strength. So what are your thoughts on, do you need to bench for upper body strength? Do you need to squat for lower body strength?
As an NCAA wrestler, I got involved my freshman year with the Westchester Powerlifting Club. And I used to bench, squat, deadlift, and do weighted pull-ups and heavy bent over rows. I was very much into that Bill Starr program also, the bench, the power clean, and the squat. And when I went to Nautilus and had trained there for a while, I stopped all the heavy lifting. And about 6 months into it, I went back and man, my bench was so down. I thought, what the fuck? I'm losing my strength, right? I'm weaker. What I didn't realize at the time was I lost the skill of holding a heavy weight and benching a heavy weight. In the meantime, all my lifts on the Nautilus machines were going up. When I was on the mat, I felt strong as a bull, really strong and fit. But yet my power lifts went down. It's because I didn't practice them.
Right.
I simply didn't practice. I didn't understand that at the time. I just didn't get that it's a very specific skill to lift really heavy weight. Your nervous system fires in a very particular way, and you got to practice heavy lifting. But my point is, and of course you've made this point many times, the only people that should be interested in how much weight they're lifting are weightlifters, competitive weightlifters. There's no reason. A clever fellow, a guy that's smart, can build his strength with relatively light loads, and the strength will be 100% transferable, if they do it right.
So you even think you've coached professional athletes in the past, haven't you?
I have. Dave Bell, he was a baseball player for the Philadelphia Phillies, and he's now the manager for the Cincinnati Reds baseball team.
Okay.
I've worked with some high-level jiu-jitsu guys, Saul Ibero, Sanji Ibero. I've had my share of, Dave Akers used to be the field goal kicker for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, the best
I was
ever.
also the strength coach, conditioning coach for Jeff and Christina Laurie. They were the owners of the Philadelphia Eagles. They used to come, and I used to go to their home, and I put a gym in there. But believe me, they were doing super slow. I wasn't going to break. They were middle-aged, and I was very careful. Jeff in particular was pretty vulnerable to injury. So we were doing very slow, high-intensity training just to be safe. But here's another point I'd like to make. All the early adopters of kettlebells in the U.S., I was on that ground floor, have all had hip joint replacement surgeries. Pavel Setsoling has had his elbows surgically operated on multiple times. When he was on the Joe Rogan show, Joe says, "How come you only do dips and swings?" And Pavel says, "Because I like to." No, the real reason is because he can't do anything else. He can't do pull-ups or he can't climb rope because his elbows are fucked. Same thing with Brett Jones, president CEO of Strong First. I like Brett. He's a very likable fellow. But he was almost bragging about his 9th knee surgery. What kind of training destroys your joints? You hear CrossFitters bragging about their injuries. And, at my age now, any injury I get now will probably be a lifelong injury because you really, as you get older, man, you just don't heal. like you did when you were younger. And I cringe when I see these guys, the way they lift the weights, and it's crazy with the momentum, and they're all into heavy lifting. But it goes on and on. There's a whole litany of guys that have had hip replacement surgeries. Dan John, who I respect, great athlete, but he always uses high momentum Olympic lifts, double hip replacement surgery. My ex-wife, DC Maxwell, third American woman to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu. She used to actually tell me, you know what? What if we find 10 years from now that kettlebells are really dangerous and just really mess you up? And I at the time said, shut up. I don't want to hear it. She had a hip replacement surgery, and it wasn't from jiu-jitsu. It was the kettlebell training.
So let me ask you this.
I could go on and on, man.
The ever since Pavel, how do you pronounce his last name? The Russian guy?
Satsolin.
Satsolin. Ever since he was on Joe Rogan, myself, Drew Bay, tons of questions about what he was teaching in terms of exercise. I thought most of it was utter nonsense, but of course,
most of it is.
He's really popular, so people will follow him blindly. Do you think he genuinely believes what he's teaching, or is he just scamming everybody?
No, I don't think he's a scam artist. I think he's an honest guy. And I do believe a lot of his principles and techniques work if you want to demonstrate strength. If your goal is to lift heavy weights and be in that world, then I think his ideas are somewhat sound. I do. You can't go wrong. And many people have gotten great results, gotten a lot stronger. But, there's that inherent risk of engaging that type of activity. I like jiu-jitsu. I'm not into, lifting weights for the sake of being good at lifting weights. I want to exercise in a way that allows me to continue my recreational pursuits in a healthy way. And I found that kettlebells was not it. But, some people compete in kettlebells as a sport. There's an actual kettlebell sport. It's kind of like the endurance version of the Olympic lift. They will snatch a kettlebell for 10 minutes straight. I know. It's like, I can't even imagine.
They are going to be wheelchairs by the time they're 50, if that's what they're
but see, they'll always point out that amazing genetic wonder that somehow defies aging and everything, and somehow defies injury. Some tough jointed, genetically gifted individual, and they'll hold that guy up as the example. Mm-hmm. But, for every guy, every YouTube wonder out there like that, there's 10,000 dudes that crashed and burned and got themselves totally screwed up, doing the same exact thing.
Right.
And you don't see those crash and burns too often.
Yeah, we got.
You're only seeing the guys that made it.
Pay attention to that, guys, because everybody sees the bodybuilder, the YouTuber. Well, he looks this way, and this is what he does. It's called selection bias. You don't see the thousand, maybe millions of people who tried that exact same approach with either mediocre, no results, or worse results. So a lot of people look at the high intensity training approach. One set, 2 sets to failure, maybe. Once, twice, 3 times a week if your intensity isn't very high or if you're a genetic freak. Can't possibly build muscle, is what they say. And if it could, why aren't all the bodybuilders doing it? If it really works, why isn't everybody doing it? So what is your answer for that?
Bodybuilders love the attention in the gym. They get all of their satisfaction, all of their joy from being in front of the mirror, primping, preening, showing off, getting the admiration of the dude bros. They love it. They love being in the gym, and they can get away with it because they're genetic wonders. Plus, many, if not most, are using some type of performance enhancing drug. And, like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to liken the pump to an orgasm. I mean, if it really feels that good, who the hell wouldn't want to be in there all the time? Mm-hmm. I never found it to be true.
Well,
But yeah, so that's where they're getting all the adoration, and that's where they feel really good. And it's like monkey see, monkey do. Everyone believes it, so it must be true.
mhm.
But it isn't true. And you have guys like Mike Menser, and then one of his disciples, Dorian Yates, that turned the bodybuilding world upside down. But then you had earlier guys. Clarence Bass looked damn good, man. He was an amazing bodybuilder, and he was training pretty much once a week decades ago. And it goes on and on. Now, some people could say, well, they're also the exception to the rule. They're also genetic freaks. That's right. Anyone is at the height of any sport activity, they're basically a genetic phenom. I don't want to use the word freak. And it's not to say that they don't work hard. Of course they work hard. But that year that Arnold Schwarzenegger beat Mike Menser in the IFBB Mr. Universe, it had been purported that Arnold was working out something like 26 hours a week, and Mike was working out 90 minutes a week. So it just depends on how valuable is your time. How valuable is your time? For a lot of those guys, it's like a part-time job going to the gym. I personally never really enjoyed being in the strength weight room as much as I did, doing the stuff I love to do. I used to ride mountain bikes. I used to like to run. I loved, submission wrestling and jujitsu. These are the things I wanted. I love hiking in the mountains. These are the things I like to do. I didn't want to be spending my time in some gym.
Right.
And the problem is, of course, unless you have big G whiz muscles, no one wants to believe you.
Yeah, and the thing about Arnold Schwarzenegger too is I found out recently a lot of his fame and his training methods come from the documentary Pumping Iron.
I saw
And
that.
it's been reported that he made up a lot of that for effect. He said he went to the gym twice a day for 3 hours each. He said he threw up a lot during training. He said the pump was like an orgasm. A lot of people don't realize he did that for entertainment value. And mostly because he really wanted to get the attention of movie producers. So he wanted to portray himself as this really over the top, extroverted, charming individual, a little eccentric in order to get the attention of movie producers, which he did. But I would say most of what he explained in Pumping Iron was an outright lie. And I think even think about it, after he said all of that, he had to uphold that, didn't he? So was he training for 29 hours a week? He might have been in the gym for 29 hours a week, but was he training his body for that long? Probably not.
No, I'm sure he probably wasn't. It's
Yeah.
like in the grappling world, you hear about the great Gama, the Hindu, I'm sorry, he wasn't a Hindu wrestler, he was Muslim, but he was a Kushti wrestler. In India, wrestling was revered, almost like a religion. And the Hindu wrestlers and Indian wrestlers would do these dons. It's like a kind of like a dive bomber push-up. And they would do, so reportedly, Gama would do several thousand a day. And it was coupled with a squat on toes called a batak. And these Hindu squats, thousands of repetitions every day. And, it seemed like your prowess was measured in the number of reps you do of these two exercises. But it turns out that these guys were just outright exaggerating and lying, or their fans were, that they weren't doing nearly that many. And it was all just, legend. No one can possibly stand that type of, high repetition training day in and day out, plus running, plus wrestling, plus swinging clubs and maces and all that stuff. It's definitely a recipe for early death.
People are under the impression, again, because of them and of course of their exaggerated claims, that high volume elicits high muscle growth. There's one question here who says, well, then how would you explain studies more volume is better for hypertrophy? And my response is, they are measuring volume by mechanical work, sets and reps, when the real measure of volume is the amount of muscular effort over time, or how long the muscle is placed under stress. Metabolic volume, metabolic stress. Like, for instance, I explain this all the time. If volume is mechanical work, then we couldn't possibly stimulate a muscle to grow stronger simply by holding a weight out. When we know that you can generate a significant amount of fatigue simply holding a weight in place with essentially no volume. So that can't possibly be the right definition of volume. So we've got a lot of people who believe that more sets and more reps is better for growth. So through your
But
experience,
look at the typical way most people do their repetitions: fast, sloppy. I'll give an example. I was in this gym in London, and I was training a guy at the time, and there was a young fella had a great physique. He really did. And of course, he had his shirt off to make sure everyone knew it. And he jumped up in the pull-up bar and he knocked out 20 pull-ups. That's you got to be pretty good strength to weight ratio to do 20 pull-ups. But when he first jumped up, I just happened to have my watch running and I looked at it. It took him all of like less than like 30 seconds, 30, I mean, he was going ba-boom, 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 to do the 20 reps. So I had my guy get up there, and he's a really strong guy. And he did 5 super slow pull-ups. Now that's a real feat. 10 seconds up, 2 seconds squeeze, 10 seconds down. My God, his time under load was like way over 90 seconds. Mm-hmm. Who got the better muscle stimulation? The guy training for, I've timed people on YouTube watching the reps. A lot of times a set is about 20 seconds. And we know time under load is one of the most important factors, right up there with intensity, for increasing strength and hypertrophy. So yeah, I can see where the guy might be suspicious, because the way most people do sets and reps, it's so sloppy, it's not really targeted, it's not focused, it's so fast that the time under load is extremely brief. Go back to Turkish get-up. What kind of time under load is any one muscle group getting during the exercise? 3 seconds, 4 seconds as you get up and get down, and it's all spread out throughout the whole body. It's just not a very efficient way to train.
Yeah, my analogy, I like this analogy. You've got to, it's like washing your car. You can wash your car with very little effort, very sloppy, very little attention to detail, multiple times, and maybe get the desired level of cleanliness on your car. Or you can spend more time on the car, wash it more slowly with more attention to detail, and only have to do it once. What most people are doing is equivalent to washing their car like shit several times, while our approach is doing it right the first time. So when people are under the impression that one set couldn't possibly be effective, well, it's because they're envisioning that set perform the way most people perform them, which is lots of momentum, very little intensity, very little effort. In which case, yeah, you probably want to do 5 bad sets if you're doing it that particular way. And of course, most of the bodybuilders doing set after set after set after set. And I would agree. You said many bodybuilders love.
By the way, it does work. No one's saying it doesn't work.
Well, yeah, anything that generates metabolic stress and mechanical tension is going to stimulate a muscle to a certain degree. But
we're just simply saying that there's a better way. And what all these young guys are forgetting is the safety and the long-term stress. All those mechanical reps absolutely erode joint health over time. I didn't want to believe it when I was young. I thought I was impervious. I thought it was going to last forever. But man, wish I would have. I did save myself. I did pull out of this before things got too bad. I ended up with just one shoulder that really bugs. Overhead pressing is really hard, which I don't do that much anymore. So and I can still do almost everything I want to do. But I have to admit, I was doing high intensity training way longer, way more than the other stuff. So it was like a decade where I was really focused on the kettlebells and the club bells and, some of the alternative functional training.
Right. Let's talk about functional training. So a lot of people like the kettlebells and the Turkish get-ups because they believe it will make you more functional. So what are your thoughts on the whole functional training movement? Or is there any merit to that?
Absolutely none. I'll give an example. One of my former jiu-jitsu students was going to Princeton, and he was in ROTC at the time. And when he graduated, he graduated lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he went through basic, and he later was assigned to the Recon Rangers. They're a badass group, man. They are like, special ops guys, right up there with, Army Rangers and, Navy SEALs. And he deployed to Fallujah, Iraq, several tours. And he told me that the average weight of a Marine Corps equipment is about 80 pounds. And ironically, it's about the same as it was for a Roman centurion or a Spartan. It really hasn't changed that much in thousands of years. They were carrying about 80 pounds of, gear, including food, water, weapons, all that stuff. And he said he would march around carrying an 80-pound of gear on his body. And, rucking is supposed to be, the big thing right now. And that it's supposed to create tremendous fitness. He said when he got back from tour, he was never so fat and so out of shape and so disgusted with himself, despite doing hours of foot patrol while carrying all that gear. So he got good at carrying the gear, and he sucked it when he went back to doing everything else. And he had zero transfer to his jiu-jitsu. He was really into it. Zero. Even though he's walking around with this big heavy pack, going upstairs, climbing over shit. So it's just one example of like a popular functional fitness, It's like, what's so functional about it, It's like the farmer's walk is a very popular thing to do, You pick up heavy stuff and you just walk. I used to like to do that. I did it back in the day. But I'll tell you, man, it's a great way to erode your hip and lower back and shoulder health over time. I mean, who the hell needs to do that unless you are forced to do it? I mean, if your job entails doing that, well, then you'll get all of the skills in doing it, just doing the job. But if you don't have any real reason to do it, why the hell would you do that? You get a freaking hand truck and move it, or a wheelbarrow, or you use some common sense instead of load your body up with stuff like that. If you have to do it upon occasion, but doing it as a regular exercise, great way to get arthritis in your feet, and your ankles, and your knees, and your hips.
Yeah, a lot of people are under the belief with functional training is that because it involves many muscle groups, that it is more effective. And you can feel it. It's more cardiovascular. It appears to be more cardiovascularly demanding because of the involvement of a lot of other muscle groups and the lack of venous return. So people are under the impression that it's more effective because it involves a lot of other muscle groups. But as you said earlier, it doesn't really do much to any of the muscle groups. And this individual who was rucking with 80 extra pounds on himself for several months came back in worse shape. So a lot of the times these functional movements provide so little stimulus to all the muscle groups they involve that they actually don't do anything past the first initial adaptation, because your body becomes so efficient with them. Not only does the skill not transfer, but once you've been doing them for so long, it involves so little effort with every muscle group that it's not even exercise at a certain point.
Well, you just get really good at doing the particular movement, You just get very, very efficient at doing the movement. I've seen, people do those kipping pull-ups, and man, they can do a lot of them. And yeah, you get some work, you get some stimulation, but it's nothing like doing slow, strict, high-intensity pull-ups. They use the kipping functional. The other thing about this functional training that try to mimic sports stuff, it really develops a skill unto itself, just completely different than the skill you're trying to develop. I've seen fighters punch with dumbbells or using rubber bands. You get a certain amount of endurance in your upper body, maybe able to hold your hands up, but it's a much better way to do that than punching with dumbbells or using rubber bands and all that kind of nonsense. It just isn't the same. And the closer the exercise duplicates the actual skill, the more motor learning confusion it creates.
Yeah, so things like punching with dumbbells, I've seen people in the gym performing boxing drills with weights in their hands, not realizing that it's going to completely screw up their ability to throw a good punch once they remove the weight from their hands. So, as you explained, a lot of these functional exercises could actually result in a negative skill transfer and make you
negative skill transfer. And for the listeners out there that don't understand this, anytime you perform a particular type of skill, let's say, for example, a skill enhancement drill, you either get a positive transfer, an indifferent transfer, or a negative transfer. And functional training provides a negative transfer to everything. You don't get, or indifferent. Some people, they call them discriminators. They seem to be able to do all these disparate, activities, and it doesn't seem to affect their regular skill. Those are the guys that play in the NFL and the NBA.
Right.
They're discriminators, but it's like people doing the balance training. Doing one leg while curling a barbell on a Bosu ball or something. That type of balance is great for that exercise only. It won't transfer to the mat or the MMA cage or the judo mat. It won't. You just get good at doing that particular balancing skill.
A really good example of that is Major League Baseball players. They're such good discriminators that they can literally put a weight on the end of their bat before stepping up to the plate and still somehow hit the ball. Most people who did that right before stepping up to the plate would screw up their timing tremendously, right?
Tremendously.
Yeah.
It's like trying to throw away baseball. When I was a kid in high school, like I said, I sucked at most sports, but I tried to throw javelin, and I was too small. I didn't have the leverage, but I did enjoy throwing the javelin. And I started throwing a digging iron, like a heavy pipe.
Yeah.
Under the mistaken idea somehow that would make me better at the javelin. And my javelin throw got worse. I was actually at 3 feet less as a result of throwing a weighted implement like a javelin. So I developed a separate skill in throwing the weight.
So bad that even though you probably developed strength doing that, the negative transfer was so bad that it made you worse. So
I wasn't a discriminator.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people need to realize that too. They see they see these NFL athletes doing balance training. And they need to realize that you're watching a genetic a genetic freak who has
a phenom. Just absolutely. Like, think of all the people that play high school football. There's not that many, actually. And of that group that play college, I think I saw it's like 3% of high school players play at the college level.
Mm-hmm.
And of that group, only about 1.8 ever, play in the NFL. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a very select group of incredibly elite individuals. So for the average guy to try to emulate what they're doing, it's insane. However, there are some really good strength coaches. Dan Riley was one of my early mentors in high intensity training. He used to strength train the Washington Redskins, and everyone keeps forgetting, man. Back the 1973 Miami Dolphins, they were the only team to go undefeated and win a Super Bowl, and they were all trained in Nautilus equipment. They were doing Nautilus circuits. That's back in the days of Mercury Morris and Larry Zonka and those guys. They was it Dan Marino? But anyway, yeah, they were all trained in Nautilus, and a good portion of Kim Wood, a buddy of mine. He was like one of my early mentors. He was one of the founders of Hammer Strength Company, along with Ken Leisner and Gary Jones. Gary Jones was Arthur Jones' son. Ken Leisner and Kim Wood, and they formed. They were the ones that came up with the Nautilus leverage equipment, and then later they made Hammer Strength. And the Cincinnati Bengals back in the day when they won all those Super Bowls, they were all training on Hammer Strength equipment.
Wow. So, and also Mark Asanovich, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He coached the Jacksonville Jaguars, Indianapolis Colts, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So this was a thing. So when people say, well, how come people don't use this? Well, they did. But the thing is now.
And some are still doing it.
Yeah, that was my next question. Are you aware of any sports teams, professional, collegiate, anybody who still uses these principles? I've seen, I think Clemson basketball, I believe, still does. But are you aware of any other teams?
I heard this guy, Mike Gittleson, what is it, Michigan is still using it. There are people around the country doing it. But unfortunately, this other stuff has become so popularized. And, you got to keep the kids engaged when you're a strength coach. So it's hard to keep them engaged when there's all this other junk going on out there. And, let's face it, if you're playing like a high level college sports program, you're pretty genetically gifted and pretty much anything's going to work. Mm-hmm. I was told by Mike Wolf, the strength coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, that used to train all his players primarily in Nautilus and Hammer Strength. This is back when they went to Jacksonville. They lost against the Patriots in the Super Bowl finals. But he was saying that they can't even get the young guys into the gym. They're so genetically gifted that they just walk in the gym and breathe the air and they start getting big. Yeah. And that only towards the end of their careers, when they start to lose a step, do they get really interested in getting the strength and the conditioning. And he was using high intensity training with a lot of his guys back in the day. But I'm not friends with any of the strength coaches anymore, so I'm not sure. I've lost a little bit of touch. Mm-hmm. But all I know is that it is a great way to train, period, and it's a very safe way to train. It's everyone's forgetting about the safety, and I would encourage all of these young guys out there, as you begin to get older. I'd start now, but you don't have to listen to me. You're going to do what you're going to do. But at some point, I think every man is forced to train this way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the current strength and conditioning coaches, do you think they're aware of safer training methods, or do you think they're aware of reducing force and aware that Olympic lifts probably aren't the best training approach for their athletes, or do you think they're completely clueless?
I've lost touch with the community. I'm sure there's some really sane, safe, sensible coaches out there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there's a lot of studies out there supporting multiple sets. But when you really break them down and look at them, they're really, really poorly conducted studies. Mm-hmm. And I just read an article just recently. It was, I think, 83 or something. It was older. But anyway, there must have been like 40 different studies cited that showed that single set, high intensity training performed at moderate rep speed was every bit as viable and good as multiple set training. And like 40 studies. And this has been known for a long time. Mm-hmm. It's just not popular.
Mm-hmm. And
just because it's popular doesn't mean that it is correct.
Right. Yeah, and there'll be a lot of individuals who have been doing multiple set training for a while, and they'll give you any kind of study that supports it. But even if the study does show that multiple set training is better. If you look at the percentage of additional benefit, it simply is not worth the extra time in the gym and the extra mechanical work and wear and tear on your body.
Especially for a martial artist. I mean,
Right.
come on, you need to get into the gym. You need to be in there rolling and getting on the mat. You don't want to become a gym bunny. You know, you need to get in there and train. Primarily, you should be working on your skill. Number one, and then the strength and conditioning is a very important aspect of that. Your endurance will be just from doing the activity itself. You know,
A lot of people think that you need, especially martial artists, boxers, based on tradition, think you need to run and do cardio for these activities. I
well,
don't.
it might have been a place for it in the old days. That's where the tradition started because those boxing matches lasted hours, unlimited rounds. So, being able to stand your feet for a long period of time might have conferred some type of advantage. But, in modern times, it's more like interval training. Evander Holyfield was the first boxer to not run. He was pretty much doing interval training.
So do you think? So a lot of the martial. So let's go over what would be your recommended exercise regimen for somebody engaging as a hobbyist in jujitsu or any sort of martial arts, or somebody that's even on the professional level. All genetic factors aside and individual recovery ability aside, what would be a good starting point for somebody engaged in martial arts in terms of exercise?
Well, you certainly couldn't go wrong with the big six: vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull, and any of the different various exercises. Could be body weight, could be barbells, could be machines, But by doing a vertical push pull, up, down, horizontal, you're going to hit every major muscle group in your upper body, right? Then you're going to have to do some type of squat, or some people can't squat. Leg press is fine. It's a great exercise, and some type of back exercise, some type of I like hinging style deadlifts, not like powerlifting deadlifts. Or you could use a lower back machine or a 45-degree back extension, something along those lines. That hits pretty much everything. Then you got to work your grip in your fingers, not just closing, but extending, forearms, neck for sure, and feet and calves. And maybe an extra abdominal exercise, especially in jiu-jitsu. If you play a lot of guard, you tend to overwork the hip flexors, and you get this huge imbalance from between the rectus abdominis and the iliopsoas group, and it ends up crippling guys with terrible back pain because the hip flexors just get too darn strong. So I recommend some type of abdominal movement that it's impossible to isolate, but an isolation movement for the abs to keep that good balance. And you only need to do that once a week, And if you don't have enough time to get it all in one workout, you could do a small muscle group day without taxing your recovery ability. Just work your neck, forearms, and grip and calves on a separate day.
So how would you recommend people? What would you recommend the rest periods look like? Would you recommend they do a resistance training workout and then take the next day off completely, or can they train the next day in martial arts? Can they train with resistance and train in martial arts the same day? How do you recommend they break it up?
I like doing it the same day. Obviously you'd want to train your jiu-jitsu first, while you're fresh. You don't want to go in there tired and with weakened joints and
right.
weakened muscle, because you predispose yourself to injury. And then maybe later in the day you do your strength workout and then completely take off the next day or even the next 2 days.
Okay.
Now, if that's impossible, you could do your jiu-jitsu, let's say on a Saturday. It's a pretty popular day with a lot of guys. And then strength train Sunday, and then take off Monday and Tuesday even.
Okay. Yep. Similar to what I've been recommending. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how I would do it. I mean, I've experimented with hundreds and hundreds of guys. Recently, I got really into the time static contraction isometrics. I mean, isometrics have been around since the time of the Spartans. And, Roman gladiators would train isometrically, both yielding and overcoming. And for guys that have had joint problems or all beat up, man, it's a fantastic way to train. Even if you're not beat up, it's a great way to train, even for young bucks. I had the U.S. Olympic Judo, the conditioning coach, come to me here in this little town I'm living in, Port Townsend, and I showed him the time static contraction. He fell in love with it. He thought it was fantastic. He was pretty convinced that traditional judo training with, they use these rubber bands and all this crazy stuff, is just getting guys beat up for no good reason. And he started switching his guys to isometrics, and he was having great success, with injury prevention. And the only trouble with isometrics, you do got to put a little extra time into stretching. You're not getting full range motion, and you definitely got to pay attention to your calves and hamstrings. They have a tendency to shorten a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think isometrics are a really good way to go because there's no mechanical work taking place at all. It's all metabolic work. And it's shocking when you put someone through a time static contraction workout to watch how their heart rate and respiration elevates.
And they're not moving.
They're not moving. Yeah. Something's going on in that metabolism, man. So especially for older athletes, man, look at the isometrics. Great way to train. Really, really, really good.
And for guys that are interested, this link below, I have 2 workouts you can do at home with time static contraction and isometric exercises in there. There's a ton of good exercises. I use them myself. I do a combination of everything.
Yeah, me too. Where I do pretty much body weight now, and I'll fill in the gaps with the isometrics, for neck and grip, forearms, and so forth.
That was going to be my next question. A lot of people ask me how to train the neck. I am not experienced in instructing neck training or doing it myself. So this is a great opportunity to teach people what they can be doing for neck training. What do you recommend for neck training?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, it's been around forever. You're just holding your head, front, rear, side, shrug. And I don't do them all in the same workout necessarily. I might do like sides and shrug in one workout and front and rear. By the way, forward flexion and rear extension hit pretty much every neck muscle.
Okay.
And I stretch my neck regularly, because your neck is under a lot of stress in sports like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA, and so forth. And of course, anyone taking a punch to the head, definitely you want to have a strong neck. I also work my jaws.
Just pushing against your palms?
Opening up.
Okay.
Yeah, because we grit so much, get a little neck jaw imbalance. Works at hiatus and the scalenes,
Okay.
Really good exercise. Good for facial features also.
In terms of like the volume breakdown, so say you were to do time static contraction, just maybe put a yoga block against a ball and contract against it or against a wall. What is
strap around a pole and push.
What's your set duration look like? Is it increasing level of effort, like 30 seconds, 50%, 30 seconds, 75, or you just go all out?
I used to do it that way. I pretty much put a metronome because I can't see the clock half the time. So I listen to the TikToks, and I'll do like easy, moderate, hard, very hard, all out, within the realm of safety. As hard as I dare. I've been using that with clients too. It seems to work out well, and I give them like a little, okay, easy effort. All right, you're 15 seconds in, a little bit harder now, moderate effort. Okay, 30 seconds in, I want you to go a little bit harder. Go like 75. All right, 50 seconds in, I want you to go very hard. Almost all out, but not quite. Last 20 seconds, I want you to go as hard as you possibly dare. Really push it. Come on. Milk every muscle fiber. That would be the coaching that I would use. I thought about making a little voice tape for myself.
Oh, just so it can talk you through.
Put it on my phone and then just play the tape.
And And you only do one set for flexion, one set for extension. That's all.
Oh, that's all, man.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
90 seconds. Time under load is no joke.
And just once a week. That's it.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I mean, I've tried twice a week. I don't even go by the day of the week, Jet. I pretty much go when I feel recovered and like I really want to work out. Because I'm basically work my own schedule. I've arranged my life so that I can do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so, maybe it's 5 days sometimes, maybe it's 6 days, sometimes it's 4 days. I feel really energetic, Hey, look, at my age, it doesn't really matter anymore, Most people meet their genetic potential within somewhere between 2 to 5 years, depending. I was at my heyday back, in the 70s and 80s.
Now it's just.
And I maintain a very high level
through
my 40s and 50s. And then it started going down.
You're
I
going.
think the critical age for men.
Years old, right?
Yeah, I'll be 70 this year.
Okay.
But the critical age for men, I believe, the real critical time, if you get through it, you're pretty much gold, is between 60 and 65. If you can get through that and still be in pretty good shape, I think you're solid. One of my yoga teachers, he was a real master of yoga, older guy. He's almost 80 now. He might be 80. Anyway, he told me that, and I found it to be true. That, that's a very critical age. Most guys can get through that, take care of their health and don't get really fat. They can do pretty good up through their 50s, but then they start getting some serious health issues. And that's when all the wear and tear on the joints really start to manifest. But, when you're a 20-year-old kid or a 30-year-old, that just seems so far off. It's like, it's not going to, it's like guys that smoke, right? You can smoke every day for years and years and years, and apparently be fine and do stuff. And then one day, you're coughing up phlegm and you're diagnosed with emphysema, or you find out that you have lung cancer, It's kind of like that with the exercise, the all that momentum. You're fine right up until you're not.
And you're almost 70 years old, and you can still roll. You still practice jujitsu. You still do yoga, weight train.
I do the things I like to do. Cool. I'm slower, and I'm very careful with who I roll with.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The most dangerous people in the gym are usually white and beginner blue belts. They are really herky jerky. It's like a fight almost.
Yeah.
But when I go with like a really well-trained black belt, wow, it becomes a chess match. See, they'll bring their level down to mine, and they'll let me move. I used to love to wrestle this one guy, Hedges Lebre. He just won the European championships. Hedges worked with me in Max's house for years. Man, that guy was so good at rolling with older guys. He would always let me put him in the red where he was in danger, and then he would, work to get out of it. He would go full tilt to get out, but he would allow me to move and work. Same thing with Alexander Ibero, multiple world champion. Even though he's like a heavyweight, man, he would roll so light. He would never smash you with his weight. He just knew how to let you get your moves in. It's called the soft roll. And it takes tremendous skill. And so, the younger guys, the more skilled guys, the bigger guys, they need to bring the level down so that they can allow the older practitioner to make his moves and play more mental chess rather than just saying, move his arm over, trick for trick, skill for skill, and just take the strength out of it. But that takes an extremely good player to do that. Hero Gracie, another guy, man, he's fun to train with. He loves to play that little game.
Have you ever rolled with Joe Rogan himself?
No, I have not.
No.
He's very good. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, plus being beastly striker. You've seen that spinning back kick that he does.
Yeah.
My ribs hurt. My ribs hurt just watching him kick that bag, man.
So you said, from 60 to 65, that's where you want to make sure if you can get through that. Is there any hope for people who haven't really done much of anything and then they reach that 60-year-old point? I've personally had a lot of clients in their 60s who haven't done anything for 30 years, and we're able to turn them around pretty well. But in your experience, do you think there's
I had a guy, this is a very interesting story. This is a true story. I had this guy come to me at Max's house. That was I owned a gym with my ex-wife in Philadelphia at 707 Chestnut Street, 1 block from Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell. So it was in a real historical area. And I had a gym on the 2nd floor, very steep stairs. And this poor old guy came to me. He could barely make it up my stairs. I mean, literally, he had to stop 2 or 3 times in the stairwell just to get his breath. He was so winded. He had been in such a weakened state. Turns out that this guy had lost his wife, went into a depression, didn't do anything for almost 30 years. And now he was in his early 80s. I put him on a very basic, kind of like a Body by Science Big 6. Well, they call it the Big 5. I always make sure to include a lower back and a hip and thigh. Anyway, I had a Nautilus lower back machine that had been retrofitted with a super slow cam, and it had a platform and a belt. We did lower back work. We did a hammer leg press. He was so stiff, I could barely get him into the leg press, even with the seat the whole way back. And we did basically a chest press in a row, a shoulder press, and a pull down. And the shoulder press irritated his shoulder, the one I had. So I just used light dumbbells. And that was it. Nothing else. And he would come in twice a week. And over time, he became more and more efficient in climbing those stairs. He got to the point where he could just walk right up. No, not even out of breath or anything. And his leg press, his legs were almost completely straight in the beginning. He was so stiff. Over time, he was able to bring his knees to his chest, so we improved his mobility, his functionability in climbing stairs and doing things like that. And he actually hypertrophy because I did strict measurements. I measured his forearms, his upper arms, his neck, his chest, his waist, his hips, his thighs, and his calves. And he put on muscular size, even in his 80s.
Wow.
By the time he was 83, he started playing golf again. He used to love to play golf. He could go out and play golf.
Wow.
He started playing golf. So it's never too late.
I have a similar story. I had an individual who was he had MS. I don't know if you've ever trained anybody with MS before, but
I actually have.
He came in using his electric scooter. After about 8 weeks, I trained him once a week. A lot of manual resistance, time static contraction, isometric, stuff like that. By week 8, 9, 10, it was a little bit down the road, comes in with his walker. He got strong enough relatively quickly to the point where he felt not only strong enough, but confident enough that he didn't even need to use his electric wheelchair anymore, and he was using his walker. So I would agree. It's really never too late. And also,
where there's life, there's hope, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, you could have every excuse in the book to not resistance train, but you can still benefit from it, even if you don't have the ability to move your legs or climb a flight of stairs. That's
correct. And I think the biggest impediment to aging well is, of course, obesity. For all you older fellas and younger fellas, don't allow yourself to get fat. It really is hard on your body, on your joints. And, once you've been fat for a long time, it's really hard to lose it. So better to monitor your portions and keep yourself pretty lean. And there's no exercising it off, man. I mean, it's just a big waste of time and energy, which is another thing we could talk about an hour on, the idea that you can, burn calories off through exercise.
Yeah, that is just some crazy, not only that, but you were talking about the individual you know, that burning calories after exercise is a myth. But I've got another myth for you that I'd like you to debunk. You're talking about the guy couldn't get up the stairs and his mobility increased. Now, what about mobility training for people who do mixed martial arts or athletes? Is there any use for that? Do people need any sort of, I guess, mobility training?
I don't think you need a lot of it, but I'm still an advocate of mobility training, and I do it every day. I do a practice of qigong, and I do the Russian Slavic health system, which is a series of joint manipulations. I
Hmm.
find it very, very useful for keeping range of motion and breaking down calcium deposits, uh, especially in the vertebrae. You hear that cricking and cracking and all that. That's joint cells being broken up through the movement patterns. I find it very good. I get down and I hold a squat every day.
Hmm.
And rock back and forth. You know, I squat so I can continue to squat. I want to be able to squat. I think it's a very good movement. Rather than sit in chairs, I try to sit cross-legged or with my legs out. I'll sit in what they call a Z sit or a S sit. Sit with my legs crossed. I really think that mobility is very good, and for jujitsu in particular, you can kind of do solo drills. You can basically break down the movement patterns and do it by yourself. So you don't have a lot of stress and you can keep your ability to move well into old age.
Hmm.
Things like leg threads, bridge, and turnout, they're specific skills, but they literally transfer 100%.
Okay, yeah, because it's the actual skill that you're going to be using. Just
It's the actual movement that I do. And yeah, but I don't believe you should do weighted mobility. A lot of guys get confused on that. They think adding weight to the mobility, no,
so should the
you do not need to.
mobility training be kind of specific to the activity that you need enhanced mobility in, or is there kind of like general? I guess
Well,
my
there is a general mobility. Your ability to be able to touch your toes, to be able to squat, the ability to get up and down off the floor. I mean, I can't tell you how many older people come to me. They cannot get on the floor, and once they're down, they can't get back up. That's mobility.
Mhm,
You know, I teach them how to do that. That is an actual skill, and it is a certain degree of strength involved.
mhm,
But it's something that everyone uses every single day.
mhm.
you know. So yeah, these movement skills I think have a place. You just can't strength train and do nothing else.
Mhm.
I
Yeah, a
don't
lot of
believe
the
that.
high intensity training community does recommend that. They recommend, I know Drew Bay. Drew Bay's not really a huge proponent of, mobility work and stretching. He says there are specific scenarios where you might want to use both of them. So what would you recommend in conjunction with, personally, I don't really do, I do my resistance training and then just normal daily activities. I don't really do any kind of mobility work or stretching or anything like that. What would you recommend for the average guy to include on top of resistance training? Maybe not somebody who's doing jujitsu, just in conjunction with resistance training. Someone like me, what do you recommend we would?
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt to be able to get into a deep squat and stay there comfortably.
Mhm.
And for you, I'd just go out and wrestle my dog every day.
I do that.
I'd roll with them, I'd wrestle with them, I'd throw that ball. Dogs are a fantastic fitness tool. They
Hmm.
get you up off your ass, so you got to go out there and walk with them.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I like a lot of the qigong movements. Hip circles and wrist manipulations and moving your neck in certain patterns. It keeps you from getting stiff. And I spend a lot of time on my iPad because I do online personal training and fitness programs with people of all walks of life, athletes right up to housewives and all elders, do a lot of elder work.
Hmm.
And I just encourage people to get up and move around, man. Not everyone can go outside for a walk, but you can certainly get up and put your foot in the desk and stretch your hamstrings, do
Hmm.
a few touches, a few bear squats, you know.
So it doesn't need to be too.
You want to keep yourself somewhat agile and mobile and supple, but you don't need to do hours of it.
Right.
You know,
So it's just go out and use your body. Nothing
use
really
your body.
Right.
It doesn't have to be. I have specific routines, but it's not necessary. I don't believe for health and longevity.
All right. All right. We're going on about an hour and a half here. One more myth I just want you to debunk before we wrap up that I think a lot of athletes and MMA practitioners do, and that's balance training. What do you think about balance training, training for balance, training on unstable surfaces to, I guess, promote your ability to balance on stable surfaces? What do you think about that?
Well, we know from motor learning studies that balance, there is no such thing as balance or general balance. The closest thing that comes to general balance is walking, gait training, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, each type of balance is specific to itself. There was actually a study done, I think it was at Temple University, the PE school, where they had people do like one of those bongo boards. They would walk, I think, a balance beam on the floor, standing on one foot, both eyes open, eyes shut, and let's see what else. I think it was a Bosu ball or something. And after 6 weeks, everyone got really good at it, and then they switched which apparatus they balanced on, and they all sucked. There's no such thing as balance. Balance doesn't transfer. Now, in jiu-jitsu, I think learning to balance on one foot can come in really handy. Like I used to train my guys. We would, my own son, as a matter of fact, he used to have this guy that was his real nemesis. Every world Pan Am champion, he'd run into this guy in the semifinals. He got beat by this guy. This guy was an ex-wrestler with an amazing single leg. Or he'd come up from the guard and take a single leg, and he would eventually tire Zach out. So I would have Zach, I'd line 10 guys up, grab his leg and pull him all over the place and try to take him down. He got so good that no one could pull him off that one leg. So that's an example of specific balance training. He got to the point where no one could get that single on him. And then he would, because his balance is so amazing. I was careful to make sure both legs got equally trained. So yes, specific balance for specific sports. But your snowboarding will not make you better at skateboarding. And your skateboarding won't make you better at surfing. And your stand-up paddleboarding will not make you better at anything else. You just get good at that particular thing. But the problem is there's some people, once again, they're discriminators, and they seem to be able to be good at a whole bunch of various balancing drills, but they're the exception rather than the rule. The discriminators are about less than 20% of the general population. Everyone else is specific.
Yeah, it's funny you gave that example, surfing and snowboarding. That's kind of one I just naturally came up with over some time, and it's a good example because great snowboarders aren't necessarily good skateboarders. Great skateboarders aren't necessarily good surfers. And the balance is just not a general trainable factor of functional ability. And to put yourself on an unstable surface, and I see people in commercial gyms do it all the time, and they literally fall in public. It's just a way to simply make an exercise more dangerous and less effective.
I've seen idiots literally doing power cleans and or barbell squats while standing on the stability ball.
Yeah. I saw a guy a couple weeks ago do,
man.
He did I guess it's called a bird dog. I'm not really familiar with what I guess it's a movement called a bird dog. You're on one knee.
Oh, where it was popularized by Stuart McGill. He's a back pain guy.
He was doing it on a physio ball, on one of those. And I'm watching him. I'm just like, he's going to go down. And he almost went down, and he kept catching himself. And it's just unfortunate. Hopefully a lot of people will see this interview and, learn that these techniques are kind of a waste of time, ineffective in best case scenario and dangerous in worst case scenario.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, ineffective. I mean, once again, there's someone that got a result from doing something, but it doesn't mean it was the best way to do it.
Exactly. That's exactly what your base does. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you coming on and, talking exercise and teaching a lot of my jujitsu followers. I've only done jujitsu a handful of times. Maybe I'll start because it kind of sounds like it's a really useful skill here in
It
Tampa,
can be
Florida.
fun. And remember, there's two aspects of it. The self-defense or the Gracie combative, that's a different thing from the sport aspect. Both are fun. I've engaged in both. I like both, and if you really want to really learn a great self-defense system, it's worth checking into. And I would go down to the Valenci brothers if I were you, if you're anywhere close by.
Yeah, only a couple hours. My father's good
Oh,
friend
a couple
trains with
hours. I didn't realize you're that far away. But listen, Florida is loaded with schools, man.
me. Yeah, yeah. So I encourage everybody else too. Start picking up jujitsu if you want to. It's a useful skill to have. Probably helps with mobility and flexibility, and we're going to
Oh,
build
sure.
all the strength. We might as well put it towards something and use it. So, do you have a YouTube channel, Instagram?
I am on Instagram. It's SteveMaxwellSC.com is the website.
Okay.
I have a Jiu-Jitsu for a Lifetime training camp coming up in Ikaria, Greece. It's one of the blue zones.
Wow.
They're renowned for some of the world's oldest living people. I went there every year for 8 years before the pandemic. And now we're back after 2 years. And I'm going to be doing this week-long training camp. So SteveMaxwellSC.com.
Okay.
Check out my events page. And anyone looking for a strength and conditioning coach, hey, either me or Jay, man, you can't go wrong.
That's right. Yeah, I'll put your website in the description of this interview, and we'll get you some traffic. Thanks, Steve. I'd love to have you on again in the future. We could debunk some more myths like fat loss, cardio.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to cover, but thank you for
So
coming
much
on.
to cover.
Yeah,
Spend
just
hours.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So thanks for talking with me and being
Thank you, man.
another supporter of my training methods. People think I'm friggin' crazy, but hey, we have Steve Maxwell here. He's a BJJ legend and a strength and conditioning coach, trained professional athletes. He uses it, works for him. Steve Maxwell brought the kettlebell training system pretty much to the United States. And what are you
Well,
using now?
Pablo did that, but I
Yeah,
definitely popularized it, but mistake.
big mistake. Yeah.
You got to admit your mistakes. We all do. We all make mistakes, and that was a big one.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for correcting your mistake. Maybe we can get people back on the right track and hopefully save some joints, save some hips in the process. All right, thanks,
I'll talk to you
Steve.
again soon,
Everybody for coming in and tuning in, and please share this video. You all know people who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You all know athletes. All know people using kettlebells. Point them to this interview, and they can learn some really good information.
Cool, man. Hey, I got to sign up. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That was Steve Maxwell. I've known Steve for a few years, and we've talked exercise on and off a few times. Prolific strength conditioning coach. Visit his website. I'm going to put SteveMaxwellSC.com in the description box. He's also a remote personal trainer. If you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you're interested in improving your training, flexibility, you just want advice from him, go to his website. You can hire him for consultations. I know a couple of my friends are really deep into Jiu-Jitsu. I know a lot of people are. Jay, lift up your shirt. Lift up my shirt. No, I'm not lifting up my shirt. But Steve Maxwell is almost 70 years old. My father's 70 years old. He could barely walk. Steve Maxwell is still practicing Jiu-Jitsu. All right, so he's a great example to learn from. Again, he popularized kettlebell training. And now what's he say? That it's bullshit. So from the man himself, Steve Maxwell has also been on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, I think like 4 times. Go check him out there too. So great interview. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you have any other topics you want me to cover next time, I'll have them on in a couple weeks again. Comment in the comment section here, and we'll have some more questions for them. All right, take care, guys.